Now, we all know what happens to some of these reworked ships. Some of them end up either getting a new life, some way, somehow, or they get a fate of either being scrapped or being sunk. Today, we're going into what happened to Classic Britannia. The Britannia, like her older sister, the Titania, were identical in only certain ways. However, the Britannia was never destined to be an ocean liner like her sister. She was only used as a hospital ship by the same company that owned the Titania before it got sold off to be the Britannia and the Lania for two separate companies. Just before the October update, the Britannia would go out for a final time, where she would go to Sunny Isle to help in the medical work. Soon, once Classic Britannia returned to the main island, we got to meet the bigger, more new, reworked Britannia. A ship that had various differences than that of its predecessor. The reworked Britannia was more favored than that of its classics than its predecessor. For instance, it had a much more better lifeboat capacity, while the classic Britannia only had 4 lifeboats. Unlike her sister, the Titania, who had 6. And unlike the reworked Britannia, there was not much use of the internal parts of the ship. At least, not anymore. The Classic Britannia, despite being smaller than her reworked successor, would still see a couple of uses for the next 5 days. On November 1st, 2025, it was a foggy day. However, the crews were unaware of what would happen next, involving the passing ship, the Princess Alice. A collision happened after an accidental turn was made too sharp, and it struck into the side of the Britannia. The Princess Alice also received damage, but the crews knew what they had to do. They had to bring the ships to Firelight Bay. That's exactly what they would both agree on. The Princess Alice and the Britannia were able to make it to Firelight Bay's own shores. However, both ships sat in shallow waters, and a fear was happening. What if one of these ships slid off from where they were sitting? Luckily, that would not be the case, as the ships would, indeed, stay where they were. Due to where the Britannia was sitting, nobody really evacuated her, or at least her lifeboats weren't launched, and everyone got off by boats. Or at least, no. Or, in the case of the port side, they got off with the help of climbing down the side of the ship. The Britannia would sit like this throughout both November and December, and into most of January. But on January 20th, 2026, a much new fate would meet her. She wouldn't be scrapped, she wouldn't be left there to rot, should instead be sold to a different company by Pokey, who would agree on doing not just salvage, but repairing the Britannia. However, Britannia would not carry that name anymore, and only her nameplate would bear the Britannia name. Instead, the company that will own her will give her much different looks. Soon, the ship was owned by a much different company. She lost that of her green stripes and medical crosses, along with other things that made her a hospital ship, such as her medicine room and her cots in the dining area, which is now a small ballroom. The company, Sunny Isle Voyages, have agreed on making the Britannia be that of a mixed ship. Not only will she be a passenger, but she will also be a cruise ship, where said ship will also have an attempt to do room service. In short, this ship would be successful. For the name Britannia, the name would be changed. A short time, the ship with the Sunny Isle Voyages should have been known as Eos, named after the goddess of the sun. During another voyage, the ship was temporarily taken out of service, where the ship would be no longer with her mast. Both masts were removed, but she still kept her lifeboats and the gantry deck that she once that made her iconic. The ship was on another voyage. However, her success was great. She didn't have any complications, and her new life as a cruise ship was completely a success as well. For a short time, though, she would remain as the Eos. Sunny Isle Voyages tried to order another ship like her, but alas, it did not go through. So, the plan to get another ship, a sister of the Eos, was scrapped. What everyone knew at the time was that the Eos still had the original boilers that the Britannia used. However, these are actually used for ovens, as the ship did have a much different engine. It didn't really need boilers. On March 10th, 2026, the Eos was sailing past one of the many islands it had to go by. It had just did a voyage to the abandoned island. The night was calm. There was nothing out at sea. However, the ship had returned to Sunny Isle, as the ship was going to get an inspection just to make sure the ship was still in top form. Unaware to anyone, unaware to people aboard, the ship would not make it back. A random garbled message did show up earlier. They didn't know what it was. I'm sorry to say, that garbled message would be why the ship would not be able to make it. They assumed the radio was out of order, not realizing they'd been picked, and it would happen. Not only would the EOS hit one iceberg, it would hit two, which did damage to her just below her waterline. That garbled message from earlier, why, it never showed up again. Those below deck were told not to go up into the bow, and to remain in the ship's, were told to remain not in the ship's bow, but to remain anywhere above deck. Now, the water was starting to flood in, and there was nothing anyone could do. There were concerned passengers asking what was wrong. Why were they allowed to go below deck? But people noticed the ship had a list. Finally, evacuations would begin. The first lifeboat launched on the ship was on the ship's starboard side. And they would begin, but they noticed the ship was listing, and they had to be quick with their evacuations, so they rushed. All lifeboats were launched for the passenger and remaining crew. While conditions below deck were getting much worse. Water overwhelmed the lower decks of the ship, and water has made its way to the stairwell. Water soon made its way into the superstructure, where it began flooding onto the bow and slipping into new rooms that water have never gone into yet. The ship's ballroom, which was once a place for patients and people that now turned into saying something for people that dance or for special events, would now be underwater. The ship no longer would be that of the EOS. The ship would now be one of the worst disasters in Sunny Isle Voyage's history. Water now begun to take over parts of the ship. The water now floods more and more into the ship. She is not to make it. And she has been, I learned, she is doomed. At least. And they were hoping at some point to make it back home. She never got to get to her inspection. She never got to be what she was going to be. The EOS was going down. Creaks and groans from the ship were heard. First funnel fell. And the last funnel will be the next one over. a final funnel has fallen. The EOS was going down. And the ship would be at the bottom of the sea. The vessel took a final plunge that fateful night. No longer becoming that of the EOS. Now she is to be a shipwreck at the bottom of the sea for years. In the early mornings of St. Patrick's Day, 2026, the investigation in this same building would happen. Investigation has found out that a hijacking attempt was done on the EOS and not elsewhere. That garbled message? Why, nobody knew why a hijacking like that would happen. They unfortunately learned why later on. It was an attempt to sink the EOS. By that of a whole different meaning. They did find out on the wreck that the hijacker was going to use explosives to tear into the boilers. But that unfortunately didn't happen, as said explosions would have caused a bigger loss of life. However, no one on the ship would die. Luckily, and it was a good thing that no Robloxians were hurt. However, EOS would have, the EOS's parent company would actually compensate everyone, excluding the hijacker, who would be arrested and barred from sailing on any ships as well. The investigation turned up later on a short day, as on March 18th, 2026, the ship would have no more investigations done on it. The ship would lay where it's wrecked. And last but not least, the vessel known as the EOS would still leave a stain on Sunny Isles Voyage's history. As for those aboard, they were happy knowing that they were glad knowing that everyone got off and any of their belongings were also recovered and brought back to them. No other salvage attempts would happen to the ship should it be left to lay on the seabed. But, however, dives would be done to the ship, as she would be a popular diving place. I hope that you enjoyed this. Of course, like I said, now the garble thing was actually meant to be something where I was trying to say something, but I got it wrong, so, yeah, I decided to include that anyways to the story. But, I do hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time. Have a good day or night, depends on what time you're watching this. Bye!